Hey guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another Retro RPG. Because at the end of another week, the end of another poll, we've got a fantastic win for Hunter the Reckoning. Now this is going to be a PDF review, so we'll be going over to the computer desktop to have a look at that in a wee second. As usual, I'll be back at the end of the video with some other channel related stuff and some other poll related stuff. But before I do that, as usual, I've got to thank my Patreons, who are wonderful, wonderful people who make all of this possible. So I'd like to thank them from the absolute bottom of my heart. Their efforts are so much appreciated. But I do have to ask that if you'd like to support the channel like they do, and I sure wish you would, or you'd like to see these videos a week early, or you'd like to see the occasional Patreon exclusives we've got up over there, or one of the other levels of patronage we've got, then we've got a Patreon in the description down below. If you check it out, it'd be very much appreciated. But anyway, let's get on and look through Hunter the Reckoning.
So, this is Hunter the Reckoning, which came out from White Wolf in 1999, and it's an addition to the World of Darkness. Now, I say an addition because I still only consider the first 5 games the core ones. So we had Vampire, we had Werewolf, we had Mage, we had Wraith, we had Changeling. Now, to me, that's the 5 core games. I know we had Mummy, we had Demon, and we had Hunter, but they all seemed extra. Now, why do I think that? Because in my copy of Wraith, which I have out because I'm just about to start game mastering it, so it's to hand, in the very back, we have an advert for Changeling, and at the bottom, the conclusion of the Storyteller series coming summer 1995. So they obviously thought that they were just going to be the core 5 games. Anyway, the World of Darkness is a world where monsters exist. And generally it's been about that. You've been playing something darker. Now, I have not really experienced Mage, but in the other ones, Vampire, you're someone who's been bitten by a vampire and you're cursed by the beast inside you. So you are forced to go out and kill. Werewolf, actually that's kind of different. The world sees you as a monster, but you are fighting for the survival of nature. Humans are the enemy. So it's a bit of a different setup. Wraith, you're a person who's come to the end of their life. Your influence on the world is over, but you are relying on that to survive in the afterlife. And Changeling, you're beings who come from a magical realm, and you are doing your best to survive. Now you're cut off from that magical realm. You're trying to feed off people's dreams, but also bolster imagination and that in the world. And we come to Hunter. Well, Hunter is a game where you play a human who has been gifted extra abilities. So you have been a human in a moment of tension, anxiety. You've been getting attacked by a werewolf or a vampire or anything else. And a being called a messenger appeared to you and granted you abilities to fight back. So now you are a supernatural being, but you are a human boosted up to that to fight these monsters in the darkness. Now, this idea didn't really appeal to me. I like the idea about a game which would be about humans fighting back and the hunters being an organized force and learning techniques to defend themselves and fight back against the monsters. But the idea of you just being another supernatural creature in a world of supernatural creatures, but you're a supernatural creature that hunts supernatural creatures, didn't seem that appealing. But as I read through, something occurred to me, something changed in my mind. And the world seemed very, very different to me. Even if reading through it, it doesn't actually back that up that heavily. So the messengers that appear to you, while it generally describes them in the book as being beings of good, got to remember that everything in this book is written from a universe, from a hunter's point of view. So you were suffering from an unreliable witness. So these beings have suddenly started appearing and creating humans that will attack the monsters. But the monsters they're attacking aren't necessarily the worst ones. What vampires are you going to find? You're going to find Camarilla ones because they're the organized ones. They're not hiding from all the other vampires. They're kind of out in the open. To a certain degree. They're still hiding from humanity, but they're operating, they have their structures all of that. So hunters attacking vampires will tend to be destroying the Camarilla, leaving the disorganized violent ones, the Sabbat, the ones who are out to kill humans, the ones who are left. Werewolves, likewise, if they're getting struck at, will be the ones who are, well, werewolves as a whole, are trying to save the world from humanity's flaws and mistakes and pollution and everything we've done. So you're quickening the end of the world. You're destroying the big furry eco-warriors which are defending it. And changelings, the ones you're going to find, are the organized ones, the ones which are trying to bolster imagination in this world and help humanity dream of something more. Wraiths, I think they'd stand a chance of affecting the ones who come to the Shadowlands rather than the ones who operate towards the far realms. Because obviously they are more distant. You can't really travel into the far realms, only a wraith can. So you're going to be affecting weaker wraiths and the ones which are more connected to humanity, forcing them into the hands of the hierarchy and the bad sides. So hunters themselves seem to be a negative force on the world. And that came to me as a very interesting concept, that these heroes, these people who have been given abilities to fight the monsters, are actually the villains of the piece. That the messengers which are appearing to them and giving them these extra abilities are creating them as weapons to be used against other supernatural forces to tear down the order and weaken them, but also to make the bad elements within these supernatural forces more prevalent and make the world worse for humans. That was an interesting twist on it. But as I said, the book doesn't back that up too well. It does talk about the messengers in a very positive term. And it also, when you get to werewolves, it does detail out how they aren't completely negative, that the hunters do think that the werewolves are amongst the better types. Although it doesn't really go into that in great detail, because most of the monster types only get a couple of pages. The one type of monster which gets more than that are zombies, which I didn't really think were part of the world of darkness. So I was very, very surprised. But anyway, going to the back cover. Take back the night. For centuries, supernatural powers have reigned, warring amongst themselves, culling the human herds and lashing out from the shadows. Creatures of night have held court since before the dawn of history. Nothing lasts forever. From the throng of humanity, individuals emerge who know the truth. They know monsters exist. Enough is enough. The forces of darkness must pay their due. You are the reckoning. And we go inside and we start off with HunterNet. Now, this is a very late 90s type thing, because HunterNet is all of those things that they made Delta Green about. They made the X-Files, they made Conspiracy X. There were so many things in the media about stories being in the press which were ridiculous, but turned out to have a backing in the supernatural. So these stories in National Enquirer magazine, where they would have Hillary Clinton has furry baby. And it would turn out that that's got some backing because it turns out that Hillary Clinton has some werewolf blood in her or something like that. And HunterNet is all of those, but extreme as well, where they're just crazy. People who have been hunters who have seen the supernatural and been driven insane are publishing all their conspiracy theories and rants in one place as well. So this is the website that hunters go to learn to fight the monsters, but also to find news amongst all the craziness that's there. So we've got an introduction written from the point of HunterNet. Then we're into the game itself, a storytelling of righteous fury. Credits page. Some very, very nice artwork in there. The introduction, talk about monsters feeding on human fears and bodies. And you being a hunter. Talks about storytelling in general, players as storytellers. A short example of play. And talking about the world of darkness being Gothic punk. Mainly in the streets of cities, that's a point it makes. The spirit of the game, talking about that. What is a hunter, what it isn't. Talking about the messengers, edges, the hunt itself, the hunter's foes, what type of monsters you're going to be going against, human relations, the hunter code, lexicon of different terms, how to use the book, what source material, and then a developer's foreword. We're going to the section itself, the here and now. So talking about the world of darkness as it stands, a world where monsters exist, but you've got the Imbued, the hunters, appearing now, a fairly recent addition. I did like that because while hunters are a recent addition to the system, so they didn't exist when the werewolf, the vampire books were published, they've been added to the world. So they've literally been added to the world. They've just been created. So going through some setup, talking about the world of darkness, an experience of a hunter, a long story, many, many pages with a diary. And then we're into the world of darkness as a setting. What's out there? Nice image of a werewolf getting shot. Not sure what damage that would do. How things really work. As I said, all of this is written in universe. So the game is letting you set this up from an unreliable presenter's point of view. So you can decide what it's like for yourself. It's not setting this in stone. Talking about the church, local governments. And then we're on to the Hunter's Creed, character types. So we've got defenders, innocents, judges, martyrs, redeemers, Avengers, Visionaries. I do like that logo for them. And that's it. We're going through character creation, how to do, get started, assigning your traits. We've got an example character sheet there, talking about what everything briefly is, coming up with your character concept, their creed, choosing their attributes, choosing their abilities, your edges, doing any last touches, such as willpower. It's got the freebie points put in there, and it goes through all of these in more detail. So you've got question and answers to build up what your character type's like. Got an example of character creation. Your personality archetypes, nature and demeanor, giving lots of examples of what they are. We've got the attributes and then skills all detailed out. Obviously, in the World of Darkness game, these are done through pips. You add a skill to an attribute and roll that many dice. And the pips give you a clue how you are. And as they get higher, you get descriptive things where you can, if you can bring that into play, you can re-roll your 10s and add. So a character who is muscly because they've got high strength will be able to re-roll their 10s when that comes into play. But if they're rolling their strength for something else, then they're not going to be able to. So it's a very descriptive system, a storyteller system, relying on players probably creating their characters with the most general terms possible for each of their attributes and skills. All right, we go through all the skills. But through these quickly. Occult, research. Then we're on to backgrounds. So you can have allies, an arsenal, bystanders, contacts, destiny, exposure, influence, mentor. So these are all the background things, what your character can pull on beyond just the written background. Patrons, resources. We've got an explanation of willpower there and how it's regained. We've got your virtues, your creeds, conviction, which is kind of the way you power things in it. Activating edges, gambles, maxing things out, how health and experience works. Then we're on to the next chapter, the Hunter's Edge, their different powers. So it talks about the initial ones, what they look like. Now, this is a very interesting bit. because Hunter's powers do have a visible effect. If you have an ability which lets you punch harder, then your fist will glow with energy. If you've got an ability to breathe gas out at somebody, you'll see this. If you've got an ability to regenerate, then the wounds will close with a glow. But only supernatural beings can see that. So werewolves, vampires, and the rest will see these happening. Ordinary people will justify it. So your wounds healing up, they'll be like, oh, they were just covered in fake blood and they wiped it off. He hit somebody with his glowing fist. No, he didn't. He just hit them hard. The ordinary humans will not see these abilities, but other supernatural beings will. I do like that touch. So we've got different powers here. Innocence, with its sub-powers going up, because as you get extra pips, you gain extra abilities. You're not just better at that broad ability, you gain certain extra powers within that. Got martyrdom, redemption, vision, zeal. Oh, I skipped one, judgment, vengeance. On to the laws of the hunt. So the rules section, talk about rolling dice, automatic successes, the rule of ones in there, golden rules, examples of different rules. Onto the tools of the hunt, so different systems, so the dramatic things, automatic feats, physical feats, mental abilities, the combat system, how to do combat maneuvers, different ranged combat maneuvers, what health actually means as you take damage, healing times, just all these subsets of rules here. So states of being, we've got derangements. So as I said, hunters will see horrible things and they will slowly go insane. So you're picking up derangements in there, leading to eventually becoming one of these people who paste on Hunter's Net all these wacky theories. But we've got obsessive compulsive, multiple personalities, schizophrenia, paranoia, megalomania, hysteria, manic depression, fugue. Got different types of diseases, drowning, electrocution, explosives. An example of play on a few pages. The storytelling system. So talking about the setup of things, when a hunter gets its first glimpse of the darkness and their powers are awoken. We've got the prelude, storytelling it. So what their character was like before they became a hunter. Monsters everywhere as they discover it. Talking about them slowly becoming more aware of the world. Talking about newly imbued characters. Just fleshing all this out for the game's master. Storytelling, the messengers. The theme of Hunter. Elements you can use within a storytelling game. NPCs. The particulars of storytelling games. Or onto the enemy, the antagonists. So we're going to go through various things here. We've got warlocks, so it briefly touches on the mages. We've got vampires, vampiric powers, the walking dead. So we've got hidden ones, we've got walkers, we've got gamblers. We've got goblins here, which I think it's talking about the changelings, but I'm not 100% sure. Got spirits, so talking about the wraiths, the ghosts, and how they can possess people. And then we've got shape changers, so the werewolves. Now, I read this with great interest because werewolves are my favorite of the World of Darkness games. I just find it so playable. It's not as perfect a gem as Vampire or Wraith, which are lovely, lovely games, but seem to almost exist just to be read and appreciated. I get the feeling that playing Wraith, playing Vampire, I corrupt it because we tend to play games in a more jokey fashion, whereas these are very, very serious things. Whereas Werewolf, it's your big furry eco-warrior going around savaging things. While the end of the world is coming, it's just kind of more fun. But reading through the stuff, I find it very, very interesting, for example, that the delirium works on hunters. While they can get abilities to make them resist it, hunters are still humans, so seeing a werewolf triggers the delirium, which makes them freeze and freak out because they've just seen this creature which has kept their species down for millennia. I really did like that. I do like the way it talks about vanishing as well. So werewolves in Werewolf the Apocalypse have a spirit realm they can enter, the Umbra. And by looking at a reflective surface, even a puddle, they can step sideways into the Umbra, disappearing from real world and appearing in the spirit world. But of course, hunters don't have any way of accessing the spirit world, so all they know is werewolves sometimes vanish when they're looking shiny things. I love that particular way of looking at it. We've got appendices, so the hunter code, with various symbols they'll mark. Hunter's gear, so different types of weapons, different types of equipments to trap and beat supernatural creatures with. The organizations, and an epilogue, where it just briefly talks about as part of the story, what a hunter goes on to. And then we've got an advert talking about the different things coming out for Hunter, and we're at the back cover. So while Hunter as written, I don't think is too interesting a game, I think it does have things in there which make it absolutely fascinating, because the hunters have no idea why they are hunters. That's the big mystery. Why are these messengers going around and activating hunters to go out and hunt supernatural? Are they something for good? Are they wanting to protect humanity from all these monsters out in the darkness? And if they do, why are they picking on things like wraiths, who are just people who have died? They're just a form of humanity. Why are they picking on werewolves, whose entire aim is to save the world? That's the mystery. And with that in mind, with the idea that the players could be playing people who think they are justified, but are actually the villains of the story, I think you can have a very interesting campaign of Hunter. I think there's a lot in there to like.
So that was Hunter the Reckoning. That won the poll this week with some 30% of the vote, which is only narrowly ahead of the others, because on 25% was Fading Sun's D20, on 24% in third position was Flashing Blades, and in runners-up position was Spycraft, which came in on only 21%. But actually that's kind of close for one of these races. Things would tend to dominate with about 40%. We've had some 50%. So this was interesting because a few votes could have swung it quite easily. But anyway, they're all wiped out the poll as usual, and we're going back over to a Retro Adventures one. Now this is all stuff that's been in the polls before, but first up we've got Shattered Pattern for Earthdawn from Faza in 1994. Now this lost a recent poll by only a single vote. It was the poll where we had joint winners, and then the third position was only one vote behind, or it had been a three-way tie. So this is the chance it's got. It's coming back. Hopefully it'll be very popular. But up against it, I put things from the very first Retro Adventures polls that I'd done. I looked back and found the ones which have been in multiple polls since then and just never come up successful. So giving them all a try again as well. So second, we've got Last Rites for Call of Cthulhu, Chaosium in 1999. We've got Tales from the Ether for Space 1889 from Games Designers Workshop in 1989. And we've got Nightwalker the Villiers Fair for Millennium's End from Chameleon Eclectic in 1991. Now, these are all very fun adventures. The Last Rites one is a modern day adventure. Shattered Pattern, Earthdawn, fantastic setting. We went over recently the Arcane Mysteries of Barsave book in quite a lot of detail, and it's a wonderful evocative setting, one of my favourite fantasy settings. So reading through an adventure would be a lot of fun. Tales from the Ether, I'm actually just running Space 1889 at the moment, but this is a set of adventures set on Earth, on Mars, on the space heliograph in orbit around Earth, on Venus, on Mercury. So a good look at the different styles of play throughout that game. And Nightwalker the Villiers Fair, well, it's Millennium's End. These are great adventures that I've run. Chameleon Eclectic did an absolutely fine set of work when they were creating everything for Millennium's End, but it's kind of forgotten about, so it never does well in these polls. much to my chagrin, because I would love to cover it again. I might just have a week where I cover Millennium's End for the heck of it, because these are on my shelf and I adore them. What else have I been up to? Well, over on rpggamer.org, I'm working my way through the stats for the Visions series. This was Season 3 of the Star Wars animated series, done by Japanese animators, giving their personal takes on Star Wars. Some of them interesting, some of them less so, some of them just weird and abstract. Now, I've been working through each episode, doing stats for the old West End Games Star Wars D6 system. So if you're interested in that, check us out on RPG Gamer, come over, read the reviews, read the stats. Perhaps they'll be useful in your games, because there are some wonderful things to surprise your players with. But anyway, as usual, I think I've been wittering on for quite long enough, so thank you very much for watching. As always, most of all, you look after yourselves, and I'll catch you later. Bye now.